Call 462-1289 for your gift of love.
This is 99.1 Pointe FM.
This is Pointe FM's nightly news for Friday, the 16th day of February 2018. A recently commissioned cadres poll shows the ABLP retaining governance if an election is called. India and Antigua and Barbuda discuss an agreement for exchange of information and assistance. The Caribbean reaches million mark in stay-over arrivals despite two devastating hurricanes last year, and 13 Russians have been charged with interfering in the U.S. 2016 election in a major development in the FBI investigation. Thank you so much for joining us this Friday evening. Those of you joining us by radio, those via Facebook Live, those via our app, and those of you tuning in via pointefmradio.com. I am Phil George. The findings of a recently commissioned cadres poll has found that if an election was to be held now, the Antigua and Barbuda Labour Party will retain governance of the country. The cadres poll was conducted 2 weeks ago in all constituencies on Antigua with close to 1,000 participants involved. Director of Cadres Peter Wickham, speaking on Talking Point earlier today, revealed that the results, which will be released this evening, show party support for the ABLP remains strong.
As far as party support was concerned, we found 36% of persons were partial to the ABLP, 24% were partial to the UPP. And then we had a range of people being partial to the other entities, whether it was the DNA, 5%. 1% said they wouldn't vote, 11% said they were unsure, and 23% preferred not to say. So you have cumulatively a significant number of people who we call uncertain voters. But certainly the ABLP had 36%, the UPP had 24% of total popular support.
The participants were also polled on the preference for Prime Minister, with the results reflecting that half of the 1,000 participants favouring Prime Minister Gaston Brown, while 26% would prefer United Progressive Party leader Senator Harold Lovell to become head of government. DNA leader Joanne Messiah is favoured by 10% of those polled, and opposition leader the Honourable Baldwin Spencer 4%. The political scientist says his findings of the two main political parties show a decline in support for the UPP and a slight increase for the ABLP.
If I do a swing analysis and I compare the 2014 election with the 2018 estimate, and generally speaking, what we do is we never compare poll to poll, we compare election to poll. And when I do that comparison, I'm showing a swing, a negative swing in relation to the UPP of around 3%, and a positive swing in the favor of the ABLP of around 1%. Essentially, what this is saying to me is that the Antigua Labour Party has held their own and has, to some extent, improved marginally, while the UPP has suffered a marginal decline. My sense is that this is entirely the result of the situation with the third party, the DNA, that has clearly taken some support away from the UPP. And that's the reason why you're seeing a slight decline in their fortunes. If an election were called right now, my sense is that the Antigua Labour Party would be competitive in all of the seats on the mainland. They should retain the ones that they currently have, and I think that they can compete quite favorably in the other three that are remaining.
The poll has a 5% margin of error, according to Peter Wickham, meaning the estimate of 55% for the ABLP can be as low as 50% or as high as 60%, while for the United Progressive Party, the 38% decrease or can be decreased or increased by 5%. The economic outlook and crime were concerns for those who participated in the cadres poll. Meanwhile, the Barbadian political scientist Peter Wickham says the recent mock poll organized by the Free and Fair Elections League is not scientific and should not be cause for celebration. The results of the mock poll conducted last week was released yesterday and declared the United Progressive Party winner of the exercise. The Free and Fair Election League says 797 persons participated in the mock election. Of that number, the UPP garnered 531 votes and the Antigua-Barbuda Labour Party 157 votes. The Democratic National Alliance polled 53, the Antigua and Barbuda True Labour Party 5, and the Barbuda People's Movement 7 votes, while the Antigua Barbuda People's Movement secured 3 votes. Commenting on the results, Peter Wickham says there are several things wrong with the mock election, and as such, it is not a true reflection of the mind of the nation.
My feeling is that a mock exercise is useful, but it's useful in terms of helping voters understand how to vote, who the candidates are, and things of that nature. But it cannot be a measure of the popularity of any one candidate, not in any way, shape, or form. There are 2 principles in scientific polling that we have to observe. One is that everyone in your population has to have an equal opportunity of being chosen. And the other one is that persons who are responding cannot select themselves. So when you're polling via the internet, you violate one of those principles because only persons who have computers can participate, and then others who have a special interest can essentially select themselves. When we do polling in Antigua Barbuda, we don't operate like that. We decide on who we choose. We select persons, and then secondly, everyone has an equal opportunity of being chosen because it's a nationwide example.
Wickham says the mock election is not a scientific exercise and persons should not be lured into believing it is a reflection of what is taking place in Antigua at the moment. India's High Commissioner to the region has met and held discussions with government officials on a range of topics, among them an agreement for exchange of information and assistance, a non-visa regime for diplomats, and official passport holders between Government of Antigua and Barbuda and India, MOU for traditional systems of medicine and homeopathy, and also a proposed agreement on International Solar Alliance. High Commissioner Mahinglingam told Acting Prime Minister Stedroy Benjamin that the International Solar Alliance agreement is being pioneered by India and France. He added that to date, 50 countries, to include Guyana, Cuba, Venezuela, and Peru, have already signed on to the agreement. The High Commissioner said once the agreement has been signed, Antigua and Barbuda will become eligible to receive various grants and assistance in the area of solar power and other fields. He further added that the MOU in traditional system of medicine will open up the country for medical tourism. Acting Prime Minister, the Honorable Stedroy Benjamin, expressed appreciation on the government's behalf to India for the assistance offered by the country to aid in the recovery of Barbuda. Minister Benjamin noted that the government of Antigua and Barbuda has had a long outstanding relationship with India over the years and informed the High Commissioner that all matters discussed will be addressed. The police and family of a 14-year-old girl are seeking the public's assistance in finding her. Brittany Scarrett of Briggins is a second-form student at Princess Margaret School and was last seen leaving home at around 6:20 in the morning on Wednesday. She was dressed in a blue blouse and a pair of long blue jeans and pink slippers. She's described as slimly built with brown complexion and is approximately 5 feet 4 inches in height with short natural hair. Anyone knowing the whereabouts of Brittany Skerritt is asked to contact the Youth Intervention Unit at telephone number 764-2302 or contact family members at 773-1752. Those numbers again, the Youth Intervention Unit 764-2302 or family members at 773-1752. Well, a funeral service was held yesterday for the Antiguan student who passed away in Cuba late last month following a period of illness. Family and friends gathered at the Tyndale Seventh-day Adventist Church to remember 24-year-old Dane Jamel Anthony, whose body arrived in the country last weekend. At the time of his passing, Anthony was a fifth-year Spanish student at the University of Havana in Cuba. He was from the village of Bendels and was described as someone who was diligent and friendly and who earned the respect of all in the scholarship division in the office of the Prime Minister, the embassy staff in Cuba, teachers at the University of Havana, and his peers. Details on the circumstances surrounding his passing have not been released. The first batch of 500 LED lights have arrived on island and installation is expected to begin immediately. Antigua Public Utilities Authority will install the lights, which will replace incandescent lamps. Information Minister the Honorable Melford Nicholas says adequately illuminating communities is of priority.
I think there is a great concern about security of persons who are pedestrian who have to walk in their communities at dusk and in the evening time. And certainly that's where we have fielded most of the complaints. So yes, we will more than likely start within communities and emanate outwards. The intention is to replace all of the lights. So ultimately, every area will be served. So it's just a priority of where to start and how to conclude.
Minister of Information and Cabinet spokesperson, the Honorable Melford Nicholas. The installation of LEDs is expected to lower energy consumption. Street lighting, according to Cabinet, consumes about 10% of the electricity which APUA provides to all consumers daily. The LED lighting will reduce that by more than 75%. According to Cabinet. Just before we wrap up our national developments this evening, we want to remind you of the road closures that's taking place in part of the island. Construction works associated with the government of Antigua and Barbuda's road infrastructure rehabilitation project. It has begun. It is a grant being provided by the United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund. As a result, a section of Fries Hill Road will be closed between Cedar Grove Main Road, that's North Coast Hardware Road, and the junction of Old Pope's Head Road, that's in front of the Sir Wright George Police Training Academy. The section is referred to as Phase 1A for the rehabilitation of the highway. Persons are asked to pay attention to diversions. The diversion route will be the Marble Hill Road. Monday to Friday, the road will be closed from 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and on Saturday, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Road closure, the Cedar Grove Main Road to the junction of Old Pope's Head Road. The closure will take approximately 2 weeks, and once again the diversion will be the Marble Hill Road. That's a look at national developments this Friday evening. Stay tuned, there's more news ahead from the region and internationally.
Want to feel great? Nothing makes you feel better than the smell of a brand new car. Nothing makes you feel better than a brand new Suzuki from Hadid Motors Limited at 6% interest. 8 years to pay, no deposit, with payments as low as $650. From Caribbean Union Bank, Friesel Road. All you need is an invoice, job letter, proof of address, and 2 forms of ID. Plus, free insurance, free licensing, free registration, and free plates. You're going to love up to 5 years warranty. That means no worries, no breakdown, and no parts problems. Come to Hadid Motors today and test drive your new Suzuki. One is here just waiting for you. Get ready to feel really, really great. Hadid Motors and Caribbean Union Bank, putting you in a brand new Suzuki. Give us a call today at 481-2500. Terms and conditions apply.
So good, I got you.
An accident can happen at any time, and being involved in one is not a good experience. It can be tragic and expensive, especially without coverage from State Insurance. At State Insurance Corporation, we protect you from facing these challenges alone. Our private motor insurance policy covers accidental collision, fire, windscreen damage, acts of God, bodily injury, theft, medical expense, accidental death, and dismemberment. Visit our website at www.sicntiga.com or call us today at 481-7800 for more information. State Insurance Corporation, for your protection and our economy.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Point FM's Nightly News for Friday, the 16th day of February 2018. If you're just joining us, a recently commissioned cadres poll shows the ABLP retaining governance if an election is called, and India and Antigua and Barbuda discuss an agreement for exchange of information and assistance. Turning now to regional developments, this Friday evening, the catastrophic hurricanes that devastated some Caribbean destinations last September slowed down tourism's progress but did not stop it, according to figures released by the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Authority on Regional Tourism Statistics. Ryan Skeet, the CTO's acting director of research, announced at a news conference streamed to a global audience that the Caribbean reached the 30 million mark in stayover arrivals for the first time ever last year, even as the region battled the effects of Hurricanes Irma and Maria, as well as Hurricane Harvey, which lashed parts of the United States, the Caribbean's primary market. In addition, there was a record spend by visitors who contributed $37 billion to Caribbean economies during the 12-month period, up 2.6% over 2016, Skeet reported. The tourism researcher explained that stayover arrivals were on track for a strong performance during the first half of 2017, growing by an estimated 4.8%. But growth was curtailed in the second half of the year by the storms, which were largely responsible for a 1.7% drop between July and December. The outcomes resulted in an overall increase of 1.7% in 2017, making it the 8th consecutive year of growth, albeit slower than the average global growth rate of 6.7%. The United States continued to be the primary market, growing by about 0.5% to reach an estimated 14.9 million visits to the region, due mainly to solid economic growth, low unemployment, and high consumer confidence, while the Canadian market rebounded strongly, recording a 4.3% increase in arrivals compared to a decline of 3.1% in 2016. However, it was the European market that recorded the strongest growth rate, increasing by 6.2% to 5.8 million visitors, with the United Kingdom up by 2.9% to 1.3 million. Trinidad and Tobago's Attorney General says laws will be passed soon which will require people to either explain their wealth or the state will seize it. This, as the government says, it is going after the money which fuels crime. The Attorney General says he will not allow the opposition to stand in the government's way. CNC3's Akash Samaru has more.
It's being described as another front on which to tackle crime because, as the Attorney General said,
the government's sole focus in dealing with crime is to follow the money as one of its main objectives.
But this attack on crime won't be focused directly on those pulling the triggers, but rather those funding the criminal elements. As the AG says, crime is fueled by profit.
1. Cash. 2. Businesses. 3. Property.
The AG says 4 pieces of law will come to Parliament to tackle white-collar crime. 1. Using technology to verify land ownership.
It requires the state to take GPS and land title information and physical surveys and map every single square footage of Trinidad and Tobago and come up with one title instrument which is unassailable.
And another which will require those with wealth attained by questionable means to declare their assets.
If you can't explain your wealth, the court is then invited in a civil trial. If you cannot explain your wealth, you lose it.
But Mr. Al-Rawi says when these pieces of legislation come to Parliament, the government will not allow the opposition to block its passage in the lower house.
90% of them have been fashioned so that we don't need to call upon the opposition for a 3/5 majority, because I'm just tired of the way in which that is treated.
Akash Samaru, CNC3.
The parliamentary opposition in Guyana is willing to support a motion made by the coalition government to have the oil contract renegotiated with ExxonMobil once it is done from a bipartisan standpoint and will benefit the Guyanese people. This is according to opposition leader Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, who in a press conference said the People's Progressive Party Civic would support the government renegotiating the oil contract with U.S. oil giant ExxonMobil. Jagdeo said they are prepared to share their views at any moment because it is a national patrimony. That is why they called for a non-partisan, non-political approach. Take all of the politicians out of the Petroleum Commission. It should be purely technically managed, and that would be good for long-term relations between the country and ExxonMobil too, Jagdeo said. Jagdeo hinted that while the opposition would support the move, they would not initiate it, since it could then be misconstrued that his party wants to undermine investment in the country. The opposition leader says that the contract in its current form could harm Guyana in the long run based on changes in 4 clauses which benefit the oil company more than the country. The 4 clauses he posited are the extension of the agreement, the stability clause surrounding taxes, the changes of the relinquishment requirement, and the regulation of the gas sector. Jagdeo said if the gains for ExxonMobil from those clauses are measured and compared against what Guyana will and has received, which he calculated to be $3 billion annually, the country and its people have sacrificed long-term benefits for short-term gains because of government's unpreparedness and incompetence in negotiating the new oil contract. In developments now on the international scene, 13 Russians have been charged with interfering in the U.S. 2016 election in a major development in the FBI investigation. 3 of those named have been accused of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and 5 have been accused of aggravated identity theft. The announcement was made by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is investigating alleged Russian meddling. 3 Russian companies are also named in the indictment. One of them is the Internet Research Agency based in St. Petersburg, which the 37-page indictment said had a strategic goal to sow discord in the U.S. political system, including the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Speaking at a news conference, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said there was no allegation that any American was a knowing participant in the illegal activity, nor was it alleged that the meddling altered the election outcome. It says a group of Russians posed as Americans and opened financial accounts in their name, spent thousands of dollars a month buying political advertising, purchased U.S. server space in an effort to hide their Russian affiliation, organized and promoted political rallies within the United States, posted political messages on social media accounts that impersonated real United States citizens. They also promoted information that disparaged Hillary Clinton, received money from clients to post on U.S. social media sites, and created themed groups on social media on hot-button issues, particularly on Facebook and Instagram. They're also accused of operating with a monthly budget of as much as $1.25 million. They financed the building of a cage large enough to hold an actress portraying Hillary Clinton in a prison uniform. The indictment says those involved systematically measured how well their internet posts were doing and adjusted their strategies to maximize effectiveness. The Brazilian government has appointed an army general to oversee security in the state of Rio de Janeiro in response to growing gang violence. President Michel Temer compared the violence to a cancer and said organized criminals had all but seized control of the state. Rio's governor issued an appeal for help after the annual carnival celebrations were marred by violence. Here's more in this BBC report.
The perception in Rio is that things have never been so bad. Most people in Brazil agreed that something had to be done. The governor of Rio had called for federal intervention in the state following the chaotic scenes of violence and lawlessness during the city's famous carnival. Street crime is on the rise, and the gangs that control drug trafficking have regained the city's shanty towns or favelas following the state of Rio's economic crisis. Many, however, blame the austerity measures of President Temer's government for the current social disintegration.
A national state of emergency has been declared in Ethiopia just 1 day after the unexpected resignation of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. A statement by the state broadcaster said the move was necessary to stem a wave of anti-government protests. Here's more.
The announcement was first made on the Facebook page of the state broadcaster, but the statement did not give the exact duration of the state of emergency or the conditions to be imposed during the time. It comes just a day after Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn announced he was quitting his position due to the unrest that has dogged much of his tenure. Parliament is due to come from recess to approve his resignation, which has already been endorsed by the ruling coalition. Ethiopia has faced more than 3 years of massive anti-government protests in various areas, including Oromia, which is the largest in the country. Part of the demands has been wider political reforms, land rights, and release of jailed politicians.
That story out of Ethiopia brings us to the end of the international developments this evening. It's 3 minutes on 7 o'clock. Stay tuned. The Weather Report is next.
Is the weather forecast and marine conditions across Antigua and Barbuda for tonight, Friday, into tomorrow, Saturday, the 17th day of February 2018. A weak pressure gradient will support gentle to moderate wind speeds across the island as surface high pressure dominates the area. Across Antigua and Barbuda for tonight, expect partly cloudy skies, the slight chance of passing showers. For tomorrow, sunny to partly cloudy conditions can be expected. The wind generally out of the east-northeast to east, ranging between 10 to 16 knots or 19 to 30 kilometers per hour. Sea conditions will be moderate, with waves reaching 1.5 to 2.1 meters or 5 to 7 feet. A caution is in place for small craft operators and invaders. Total rainfall for the month of February at the airport is 21.2 millimeters or 0.83 inches. High temperature recorded today was 29 degrees Celsius or 84 degrees Fahrenheit. Tonight, minimum temperature can be expected is 22 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunrise time for tomorrow, Saturday, 6:32 a.m. and sunset time for tomorrow, 6:10 p.m. Cecil Matthews from the Met Office reported.
The weather report brings us to the end of Pointe FM's nightly news for Friday, the 16th day of February 2018. Just before we go, a recap of the headlines that made the news. A recently commissioned cadres poll shows the ABLP retaining governance if an election is called. The poll was conducted 2 weeks ago in all constituencies on Antigua with close to 1,000 participants participating. The participants were also polled on the preference for Prime Minister, with the results reflecting that half of the 1,000 participants favoring Prime Minister Gaston Brown, while 26% would prefer United Progressive Party leader Senator Harold Lovell to become head of government. The DNA leader is favored by 10% of those polled, and the opposition leader Baldwin Spencer 4%. The Caribbean reaches the 30 million mark in stay-over arrivals despite 2 devastating hurricanes last year, and 13 Russians have been charged with interfering in the U.S. 2016 election, in a major development in the FBI investigation. We thank you so much for joining us for this Friday edition of our newscast. On behalf of all of us here at Pointe FM Radio, I am Phil George, wishing you a pleasant evening and do have a great weekend. The time in Antigua and Barbuda and the rest of the Eastern Caribbean, 7 o'clock.
This is 99.1 Pointe FM.